Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. We bring you thought-provoking guests and topics every week to challenge your thinking about leadership. Our aim is to help you become the leader that you wish you always had as we learn together and lead together. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honoured today to be joined by a return guest. Brett Larson is going to be the second guest that we've had on the show for a second time. You'd remember Brett from way back in season 1 with a wonderful episode called Leaders with a capital L. And it was one of our most popular episodes we've ever had. So if you have not caught that episode, please do go back into season 1 and check it out, because I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Now, why are we having Brett back? Well, he's got some exciting news. He's about to launch his book, Discovering Leaders Within, a modern guide for cultivating your team's potential. And we're here to hear from Brett about all the things that have happened in his life since he was last on the show, and then to get into the book and what it's all about. So, Brett, welcome back. It's so great to see you again, sir. Please, why don't you share with the audience a little bit about what's happened in your life since you're on the show? It was almost over a year ago.
Thank you, Mick, for your kind introduction, and I am full of gratitude that you'd have me back. So what's happened is I am going to be retiring from my current full-time job on March 1st with Gore Associates, and I'm going to be the book is going to be launched on February 11th, though it's just around the corner, and I'm going to be utilizing the book to grow an individual business with a small team. I've aligned with a company called Humessence, and we have a vision of bringing great leadership, human-based leadership skills to leaders and organizations so that you can provide skills for people that are equally good at the boardroom as they are at the dinner table. So it's essentially recognizing the human characteristics within all of us and how to bring out our greatest potential. So starting with that group and ready to jump full force into that effort. My vision is really to improve the lives of workers out there by delivering improved and excellence in leadership. So helping leaders get better at getting the most out of people and treating them as high potential individuals.
So well done. First of all, congratulations on a successful corporate career, and now the bold move to step away from that and start doing your own thing with your business partners there in Humessence. And I'd like to circle back to that a little bit later, but I want to unpack a little bit more about that vision. You want to improve people's lives through the workplace. Tell me what makes that important to you.
Well, as many of us probably have, I've had the experience where when I have a leader that's a challenge, it's suffocating. One environment I had been in long before Gore, I found myself spending most of my time trying to figure out why something wasn't my fault. And so you'd go into this meeting and you explain why it wasn't your fault and why it was somebody else's. And that was just a complete waste of time. I could feel my soul leaving my body in each of those meetings, and I wasn't able to focus on the value-adding activities of creating a great environment, of solving problems, of driving continuous improvement, and really being a serious business and a serious team. Likewise, I've had great leaders that have been empowering, that I felt like a partner with, that have gotten the most out of me, and where on Monday morning I was excited to go into work and contribute and drive myself to get better and better because I was so inspired by making a difference. And so those two contrasting experiences that I've had, I think a lot of people have felt similar things, and I would love to help promote the latter experience.
Yeah, so two words popped into my mind when you were talking there, Brett. The first one was defensive. So in that first workplace, your mindset and your posturing seems defensive. And the second workplace you spoke about, the word was empowering. Tell me, what do you believe were the fundamental differences between those two workplaces? One where you've, I'm going to say, felt the need, although you did say it felt like your soul was leaving your body, very interesting turn, but you felt the need to be defensive, and yet in the second place you felt empowered. What was the fundamental differences?
Well, that is a big question, but I think it starts with a couple of things. One is that in the positive experience, it's been in an organization that has defined what their values are, what's important to them. And then that creates the foundation for making decisions, for interacting with each other. So let me give you an example of some of Gore's foundational values. A belief in the long-term view, not making short-term decisions that sacrifice long-term value, a belief in the individual and in the power of small teams, and in commitment, that when you make a commitment, you meet the commitment, and we hold each other accountable for those things. These values give us a language, give us an accountability towards each other, and help align us when we're trying to make decisions and when we're doing things when no one is looking. They provide us basis for our behavior. Whereas in my experience where I was very defensive, we didn't define those values. It was very much dependent on what was hot that day, what great idea that some leader had that they hadn't communicated to us, that we just had to kind of blindly follow. And then without having input in that, when things went south, being able to not be blamed, because that leader then becomes, okay, I've got to find why, who screwed up. I need to be able to point my finger at somebody. And so it creates that environment of not being the one that they can point their finger at. So I think values, a basis in values, is a really key piece. The other thing that values do, just to finish the thought, is when you state what values are important to you, it attracts the people who share those values. And so you're much more aligned with each other on what's important and how we interact together.
I picked up something really interesting there that turns out to be the two sides of the same coin, and it becomes about perspective and mindset. And I want to test this with you and see how it sits with you. So, all right, so we've got one organisation that's clear on values. They declare their values, they define their values, they share their values. In doing so, attracting people around them that believe in the same values that they believe, but those values become the reference point for decision-making and behaviours. And you use the word accountability. It still drove accountability. And yet in the other workplace that did not focus on values, I'm going to flip that coin over and say the word blame. Blame is not accountability. Blame is not. And yet I see some workplaces out there, this is what I want to hear your thoughts on. I see some workplaces out there that drive a high performance culture, but it's a high performance culture around blame, which is different, or accountability. How does that sit with you?
I totally agree with that. And I think for me, part of accountability is not a one-way street. It's an agreement that, so Gore's value around commitment. No one makes the commitment for me. I have a job description. I have key responsibilities, but how I deliver that are commitments that I make. And then I meet those commitments, or I'm accountable for not meeting them. But I have played a role in authoring what those are. Whereas the other environment was much more somebody else's idea, telling me what to do. I might try and offer some things as the assignment is being given, but it didn't feel like I owned it. I was implementing somebody else's and doing my best to do it, but it was much more of a fearful, short-term environment, which didn't feel at all like a partnership or that I was making a willing commitment. I was just trying to meet somebody else's expectations.
It's really good. I feel like we're doing a live case study of two organisations. We don't need to mention who the other organisation is, but let me play it back to you. So on one case, I'm hearing instructed, fear and blame. And on the other coin, in the Gore case, and we can name them because with great pride for you, I'm hearing empowered, engaged and trusted. So in the second one where you are making the commitments, you're in a process of co-creation where, your leaders might be deciding generally this is where we need to head, but Brett, how do you think we should get there? And they're getting you to be the co-creator of the journey to get there. And people support what they create. People don't like being told what to do. So in one case, Brett's talking about a boss, I'm going to say a culture, not just a boss, but a culture of being told what to do, not being trusted, having fear and being blamed when things don't get wrong. And then on the other one, where he's the co-pilot of the journey, where he is empowered, he is engaged, he is trusted, and he co-creates the journey that you're going on. Is that the fundamental differences there?
I think that's very accurate. I would add just a couple of contrasting stories here, if I might. In the negative environment, I was in my first leadership role, I was given an assignment to run a department. And I walked into that without any leadership experience, making 6 out of the 7 failures that you talk about in your book for new leaders, and just trying to, okay, I'm an engineer. I can understand the technology. I can drive this department forward because of my training. And I didn't rely on anybody. It was a very personal call to action that I took on, and it was miserable, Mick. People that had worked in this department for 20 years that were very expert just didn't have the scientific know-how to translate what they were doing into scientific terms. I stepped all over them, and my relationships were horrible. It was a brutal environment for not only me, but for the people that had this term wet behind the ears college boy coming in and telling them how to do their job. I contrast that with this other environment where values are stated. It's much more collaborative. I took this new role, never had done it at the company before. It was to implement design for manufacturing on a team that was working on a new product. I knew the concept of design for manufacturing, and it means, low inventory, continuous flow of product. You make errors very difficult to make. You have very clear signals and everything. I knew what it looked like. I didn't know how to do it. And this was a new product development effort. I stepped into that team that I was leading and said, you guys, if it's okay, so we can center on what goal we're trying to achieve, let me share with you a presentation on what design for manufacturing enables, what it creates. And I did that, and we had a great conversation. And then I said, I have no idea how to get there. Let's talk about how we can achieve this goal. And Mick, it was the most collaborative, wonderful. We had engineers that were very to themselves, kind of antisocial, sharing their years of experience on what has worked for them. And this team of 6 people, everyone was contributing, challenging each other. And the end result was very positive because I didn't have all the answers and I didn't pretend to have all the answers. And that made everyone else better.
Very good, Brett. And I have to say, very kind of you to mention my book. And Brett and I were talking offline before we started recording. That's a very common story. So the chapter that he's talking about is the common mistakes that most leaders make. And there's a list of 7 mistakes in there. And the amount of times I have a very senior leader read that book and then say that was like a checklist of the way I used to lead. It's like, yeah. And Brett is saying 6 out of 7. That's a very common answer. And the things we're talking about, always wanting to be the smartest person in the room, answering every question, doing too much yourself, all of these things. So I encourage you to go and have a look at that in my book around those 7. If you don't read any other chapter, read that one. Of course, I'd love you to read the whole thing, but this is a very common story, Brett, is what I'm trying to say. And then when people make those shifts, they make those shifts away from the directive, the instructive, and quite often someone that's been very good as an individual contributor, and therefore they are clever and they're smart in their domain, but they don't make the shift to leadership. And leadership is a mindset shift where you're no longer, don't need to be the smartest person in the room anymore at all. It's about creating that environment that Brett is talking about where everyone in the room felt that they were co-creating and being part of the journey, not just being told what to do. I want to pick on something now, Brett, because you've used also some interesting terms. I want to get into the emotion of this because you've used the words measurable, you've used the words horrible, and earlier you said you felt like your soul was leaving your body. Tell me about the emotion of how it feels to work in the culture, the previous culture that we're doing the comparison here.
Oh gosh, every day was just kind of a drain. There were so many, when you lead a group of people, they have a lot of needs. And especially when you don't have the values thing, then you look to your leaders because you don't want to screw up. It's the culture of not making a mistake. And I just never felt like I was creating an environment that really helped them to flourish because I was just spending so much time fighting off issues or fighting fires that were created. Because when one of the best things about the future example is that when I was vulnerable with the team and shared that I don't know, people just jump in and my life becomes so much easier. And it becomes, how do I help break down barriers that they're facing so that they can do what they do? And that becomes my focus. And that is a very rewarding kind of atmosphere to be in. The other way, it just feels like it's all on on my shoulders, and that the whole reputation of the team is for me to protect. And a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of second guessing, a lot of just anxiety to not make a mistake and put other people that I led in a bad position. So it felt like I was very alone on an island, and I got a lot of stuff done at times, but nothing, it's not sustainable emotionally at all.
I'm picking up an interesting nuance that we haven't discussed on the show before. I want to test this with you. So what I'm hearing here, think about your vision that you spoke about earlier in today's episode. You're talking about creating a better environment where people can actually enjoy their life and actually enjoy their work again, right? So we know the stats. Only 1 in 5 people in the world truly love their job and like their boss. People are spending up to 1/3 of their lives in these workplaces that either don't inspire them or, worse still, completely stress them out. What I'm hearing from you, this is the nuance. In those cultures, because it's not just one leader that creates this, in those cultures that Brett is talking about, his former culture that was very stressful for him, it's not just the workers and the team members that are not enjoying themselves, it's the leaders too. So we create these cultures where the workers come to work each day in a stressful environment where they go home stressed and didn't enjoy their day. And the leaders that are in that blame, fear, directorial culture, they're not enjoying themselves either. That's what I'm hearing from that, Brett. Is that what you're trying to say?
Absolutely. And it felt like we were in competition with each other. You know, there were some leaders that you had as friends because you had worked up together with them, so you had a historic relationship, but it was very adversarial in general. And I think that was actually by design. They had a term for it. Competitive business units, I think, was what they used. They wanted to create that competition between different entities within the organization, thinking that we would all aspire to be better and better. But what it just became is undermining of each other, not helping each other out. One of the other values that Gore has that's just genius, it's called the freedom principle. And the freedom principle says that we expect, you have the freedom to help others be successful. In fact, we expect you to help others be successful. And this isn't just for leaders, Mick. This is for everyone in the organization. So instead of, that changed everything for me. Instead of helping somebody out and sharing information becoming a loss of my power, it is now I am a high-performing associate because I'm multiplying my experience and my value. So that's another example of a principle that drives amazing, consistent behavior in a great culture.
I want to unpack that just for a little while around high performance cultures. Again, I've brought that up a couple of times because I do believe that senior executives are well intentioned when they do this. They think it's good for everyone, but it's short sighted. So what I'm hearing from you, the balance I'm hearing is balance between performance and impact and maximizing your impact, right? So in a high performance culture, some organizations err to the side of, they'll say things like competition is healthy. They'll put people up against each other. It becomes about individual performance. How much productivity can you individually get out? Or that Brett, he's a hard worker, and all of that kind of mindset. High performance, not very caring. So in a Hofstadter's dilemmas point of view, one of the dilemmas is one end of the scale is performance, an obsession with performance, and the other one is obsession with caring and maybe not a lack of accountability and not enough performance. But what I'm hearing from you, Brett, is when you make that shift and you realize that leadership is not about you. It's not about how much you can do. It's about how you can create the environment where all of your team can do their very best job. And the simple math here is this. If Brett is a leader, a high-performing individual contributor, competitive against his teammates leader, he only has 24 hours in a day. Regardless, he is not God. He cannot reset the clock. He gets 24 hours in a day. Now wind the clock forward to where he changes his mindset and he's focusing on his team. To keep the math simple, let's say that he's got 10 people in his team. If he now spends his time creating that environment where he's removing obstacles, he's creating that environment where people can do their very best work, he now mathematically has 240 hours in a day. Now, clearly people do not work 24 hours a day. I think you get the point. It's about maximizing your impact by enabling the people around you. How does that sit with you, Brett?
Oh, absolutely true. That's been my experience. And we all sleep better at night because it's not on any one person's shoulders. I think it was Peter Drucker, correct me if I'm wrong, that said culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think that's very true.
Yeah, fantastic. And this is exactly what we're talking about here. And we know then, you keep on talking about, going home stressed and all this kind of stuff. We know that if you're in that environment, you're not going to do your very best work. A little bit of stress is good. And we know that from things like Yerkes Dodson, that a little bit of stress gets you out of bed and gets you striving towards. But when the stress tips over the edge, your performance goes backwards very quickly anyway.
And you also don't bring your best self home. And so you bring a stressful self home, and now you're creating stress in your home life, which just builds on not being able to be a good employee as well. So that's what the group that I'm a member of, Humessence, the human essence, we want to bring the human essence at work and embrace it, and also realize that as we create an engaging, inspiring opportunity for you to contribute and be an owner at work, it has wonderful effects at home where you can be your full self at home as well.
So I love this term, human essence. Let's use that as a segue to talk about your new business and your new business partners. I want to start with the principles of what you're talking about here first, which is you said human essence, and I know your acronym HUMBLE from our last episode around human-based leadership. Let's unpack that. What does human essence mean to you?
Essentially, human essence is, like I mentioned, that we all have our own unique perspective. We have our own experiences. It's not like anybody else's. And there's value there at when you see a problem, at seeing it from multiple directions so you can see it fully and most effectively solve those problems. And so when you create an environment where I can be myself and I can deliver that perspective and challenge you, Mick, as my leader with my perspective, even if it's different than yours. Now we see things much more fully. We have better solutions. We have more ownership in the solution because we have greater input and everything gets better. So the human essence that we're talking about here is being able to share all of the gifts that I have to offer and it not threatening anybody else because we're all welcoming that towards achieving the shared goals that we have.
Yeah, I'm hearing a few important things here. First, I'm hearing an environment where I can feel safe to show up as my authentic self and bring my superpowers to the table. Everyone has got superpowers. Everyone's got weaknesses, but everyone's got superpowers. I'm hearing a culture where I can respectively challenge what's going on from my perspective because I bring different skills, knowledge, and experiences to the table. So if I see what's going on and go, oh, are we sure about this? Is this the right way? That I've got the ability to respectfully challenge, even if it's my boss. So showing up as my authentic self, being seen as a human that has skills, experiences, and knowledge, and then having the license to be able to, I'm going to say, respectfully speak my mind and challenge what's going on if it needs to be challenged.
Exactly. It's well summarized.
All right, very good. Let's talk about humble. I want to particularly talk about humility. And you shared some notes with me that I thought were really interesting around what humility is and what humility isn't. So we hear a lot of discussion that humility is one of the attributes that all leaders need, vulnerability as well. But I feel that there can be a misunderstanding of what humility is. So tell us what you believe humility is and what humility isn't.
Yeah, so humility is not being meek. It's not just getting along. It's not being the nice guy. Humility is being grounded. It's knowing who you are and having enough self-confidence to know that you don't have to have all of the solutions and it's the ability to subjugate your personal interests for the common interests of the organization and for the team. And when you look at humility in that way, it doesn't mean that I don't address difficult issues. I don't have difficult conversations. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that we have a greater good here that we are defining for our team and we're defining it together. And, it maybe that good requires me to have a conversation with my leader and to challenge them. Gosh, that feels really uncomfortable for me. And that doesn't feel like it serves my self-interest, but it's not my self-interest that's important. It's our team team interests. It's our group interests. It's our organizational interests. And if that requires me to do something a little bit uncomfortable for us to be successful, then that's what I need to do. That's the humble that I'm talking about here. And it's also, you mentioned earlier, Mick, not having to be the one making all the decisions, not having to be the one doing the work. Humility in a leader, to me, is that the leader is perfectly comfortable not even talking in a meeting, not stating their opinion, just listening and asking questions and managing the energy and making sure everyone is contributing. That's the humble leader I'm talking about, which is very different from not having an opinion or making sure it's somebody else's so they don't have to have their neck on the line. No, when we make a decision, now I am fully committed and I own the decision is a part of this vision of humility as well.
A few interesting words popped out there for me. The balance between humility and confidence. And they do not have to contradict each other is what I'm hearing from Brett here. Now, to give everyone a bit of leeway here, in most cultures in the world, it's ingrained in us from a very young age that we should be humble. But how that being humble can be interpreted is then to be apologetic, to be meek, to start every sentence with, oh, excuse me, I'm not really sure, or you start apologetic, and that does not project confidence. You can be humble and confident at the same time, but it's in the way that Brett is talking about where not everything is about you, but it doesn't mean that you should shy away from being proud of what you're good at. So for me, the potent mix is humility and confidence, and bringing those together to be the most amazing leader, to park the apologetic meek element of what we think is humility, and to ensure that you're not self-centered, and to ensure you're not egocentric, but own your strengths, admit your weaknesses, gather people around you that complement you, and create something together. So it's not about you, it's about we, and it's about what you create together. How does all of that sit with you?
Oh, that's 100%. And you say it so nicely, Mick. I appreciate your summary. And I would add one additional thing is that for anybody that's a doubting Thomas, that you don't see it, read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. And the basis of the book is looking at high-performing companies over time and what makes them different. And at the top of the list, it's a level 5 leader that is a great leader in every way, but they have the additional attributes of they are driven for the success of the organization, and they are humble. So that's the case study in why humility is a critical component in world-class leadership.
Brilliant, Brett. All right, appreciate that. Now, tell us a bit more about your business partners. How did you find each other? And tell us about the vision for Humessence.
Okay. It's interesting. My wife was going through a certification to be a professional coach. She was partnered up with a guy named John Marshall. And as they were coaching each other, she kept saying, you need to talk to my husband. And then she would get off the phone and tell me, you need to talk to John. And she gave him the link, Mick, to your podcast where I was a guest. And so you were the key person in connecting us. John listened to it and said, you're right. I need to talk to your husband. He believes a lot of the same things that I believe. That started this relationship. John is a young man that had great experience, was climbing the ladder at a big oil company, and decided that he needed to do something that was a little bit more connected to the human spirit, that the business wasn't as aligned with people as he wanted to be. And so he started Humessence. And after talking to me, we agreed that we have a lot of common interests and a lot of common vision. Our vision is to create that culture, help companies create that culture where people can be engaged, where psychological safety is present, and people can reach their full potential and bring home the gifts of that culture to be great husbands, wives, parents, siblings, etc.
Well, best of luck. We're excited for you, and it's great to see some people that have got shared values and beliefs, again, coming together to make an impact on the world and on people's lives. So we wish you the best of luck with that. Let's get to the book. So if I get my diary lined up correctly, this episode goes to air the same week that your book will be launched. So tell us what inspired the book and what people can expect from it.
Excellent. Thanks, Mick. So I led different teams, probably the biggest of which was about 220 people and about 200 million in revenue for 30 years. And the last 4 years, I realized that I love helping leaders develop and grow their skills. That's what excited me the most. And so I went into leadership development full time. And the first thing I did was a lot of research to understand what science says are the most important attributes in an effective leader, and what studies have shown is how to most effectively effectively run a leadership development program. And through that research and my own experience, I came up with a 7-step method that I call human-based leadership. So the acronym is HUMBLE, HUM from human, B from base, and LE from leadership. And it's very simple. And I will contrast this with a couple of examples, or I will illustrate this with a couple of examples. When I was a leader, I was sent to MIT for a week to get some training with a bunch of other leaders in our organization. It was wonderful training, lots of case studies. We learned how to create a strategy more effectively. It was a big commitment, taking a week out of work to go to this class. And then when I came back, and it wasn't necessarily that we needed to improve our ability to make a strategy, but that's what we learned at MIT. So I came back, I'm all excited to apply some things. It wasn't strategy season. There was a lot of stuff going on, and I probably ended up applying about 20% of what I learned at MIT, prestigious university. I contrast that with, so I'm still on the same team. We're setting up an operation. We're trying to figure out how to run the operation more effectively. And we heard about this company called Ventana that was in Tucson, Arizona. So a group of our leaders drove down to Ventana. We set this up, obviously. We saw how they operated. They had a board that they used to monitor their key metrics. And we just adopted what they did, brought it back. We used basically 99% of what we learned there. And it was something that we needed. It was very timely. And I learned a ton from what they did. And so that's an example where it wasn't a huge commitment. It was half day of travel and a day there. It was what we needed for our organization and where we were at the time. And it was with my co-leaders so that we all were learning the same thing and challenging each other to apply it effectively. Those are attributes that I use within Humble. The first thing we do in Humble is we measure. We measure the culture of the current environment. We specifically measure it around what's the level of engagement and what's the level of psychological safety. A lot of work has already been done to show these questions are accurate in measuring that, and the better the score, the better the business results. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we measure the culture with those things. Then we review it with the leader to understand what are the opportunities, and we determine a plan forward. And it's us as leadership development professionals and the leader partnering in setting goals for improving and identifying one or two things that we're going to work on. We don't want to work on everything. You can't. So let's identify the priorities. So that's step 2. The third step is we deliver emotional intelligence training to the team, to the leadership team. So we know that emotional intelligence is the highest attribute that has the highest correlation with superior performance. So we know that's of foundational importance. They grow their own emotional intelligence through it, and they grow team emotional intelligence and a comfort challenging each other. So we deliver that training. Then we work on whatever else came out of the survey. So in one case, it was leaders not having the hard skills of lean manufacturing. So let's get them that training. In another case, it was difficult conversations. So let's set up additional role plays and practice having difficult conversations. So we're addressing the specific needs that the survey had for that team. So that's step 4. The fifth step is something that's a little bit separate, but if you believe that people learn primarily through experience, and one model says 70%, one model and 20% is partnering with somebody and 10% is in the classroom. If 70% of our learning is through experience, how do I learn how to be a better leader? Is it by going to a class? Sure, that's helpful, but it's more getting the experiences that help me grow and develop as a leader. So step 5 in Humble is assuring that the leadership team has a process where they are reviewing their burgeoning leaders, either people that are currently leaders that are growing or people that aren't leaders yet. And as a team, identifying what those individuals need in their next step to grow their skills to be leaders. So we want leaders to be very involved, very engaged with growing future leaders and not outsource it. So that's step 5. Step 6, and I'm sorry, there's a lot of information here. It's all in the book. Step 6 is, okay, we've done emotional intelligence. We've addressed whatever else they needed based on the survey. We've implemented a process where leaders are developing future leaders. How do we sustain that? So in step 6, we're asking, what's working for you? You took emotional intelligence a month ago. What have you tried that's working? Our role is just to facilitate this leadership team identifying those 2 or 3 things that's working for them, and how do we embed it? So how do we embed it into existing meetings? How do we embed it into existing standard work they might have as leaders? How do we make sure that when we leave, it has become habit? So that's step 6. And then step 7 is 3 to 6 months later, duplicating the measurement measurements in step one to make sure, did we hit the goals that we set? What still is an opportunity? And do we need to continue that cycle of growing skills? So step 7 holds us accountable as leadership development professionals and as leaders, saying we want to grow, we want to improve.
Oh, wonderful, Brett. There's so much I love about that. I'm going to summarize very briefly, and then I'm going to talk about the 2 things that really stood out for me there, Brett. So we're measuring, we're reviewing with the leader, we've got a focus on EI, we're looking to architect a plan that addresses any kind of specific needs that came from the measurement. We're looking at our pipeline of where our next leader is going to come from and are we focusing on them. We're looking on how we're going to sustain it, and then we're going to measure again. And that measure again, I like what you said about accountability. I also feel like it means that the cycle is going to start again. So when you do that second measure, it becomes a pass 2 through that leader's development. The 2 things that I really loved that I picked up is that you're partnering with that leader. You're partnering with that leader. This is not HR or OD going and picking someone and saying, congratulations, you're off on a 3-month course. This is partnering with the leader and measuring and looking at what their individual needs are. And the second one was about that experience. And I'm going to link this back to something that we spoke about with the 7 common mistakes that most leaders make. So think about what Brett is saying about experiential learning. So 70% of what we learn is from experiencing and doing ourselves, 20% from the way that we buddy up with other people, and then 10% is what you can learn from formal training, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a pretty well-known stat in the L&D industry. Have a think about what we were talking about before, where leaders have a tendency, one of the mistakes we make is to do too much. We do too much. The takeaway I want to give here is every time you as a leader do something, you are robbing someone else from the opportunity of learning and growing how to do that thing. So when you have this 7-step process that Brett's talking about, there are opportunities every single day to give someone in your team the opportunity to grow and learn. How does that sit with you, Brett?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that is so true. And the learning and the development professional may not be aware of those opportunities. And so as the leaders identify them and challenge the person to work on them, they're also a mentor and helping them through it, but they're not doing it for them. And one thing you talked about with partnering, and I agree, it is absolutely critical. As I've been doing this work, I have promoted it, but I haven't said, okay, Mick, now I'm going to come to you and we're going to implement Humble. It's been a pull. Because you need to be committed to improving and changing. You need to be a welcome recipient. As we go off and work with Humessence in delivering this same content, one of the things we're working with now is how do you have an intake process where you assess the thirst, the desire? Because if you're pushing this on somebody, then it's much less likely to be successful. And I don't want to waste my time, and I don't want to waste anybody else's time. And in fact, if we're not helping a team measurably grow their culture and their impact on leading others, then we have failed and we are going to continue to try again. So we need to have the right partners as we undertake this.
Yeah, brilliant. 2 things jumping out there. And to be clear, I've got the highest respect for the L&D community. I think they're wonderful, right? But the first one is that L&D is not the sole responsibility of the L&D department. It's a partnership with the leader. It's a partnership with the person involved, right? And then the second part is about that engagement. Once again, coming back to people support what they create. And I think if we're all honest, we can think into our memories, and you can think of a time where your company sent you on a course and you arrived at the course and you don't even know why you're there, let alone excited about it. No one even told you why this course and why now, right? So whereas if you're partnering in your leadership development design, you're not just getting told to go on a course. You're going, if you do go on a course, or you're going on to some kind of experiential learning because you wanted to do it, you're excited about it, and you're going to enjoy it more, you're going to learn more if you were part of the design that led you to whatever that learning experience was going to be.
The same is true for, and I know we talked about this in our first podcast, in delivering feedback to somebody. If I can help somebody see the truth in the feedback on their own without just shoving it on them, the potential for them to improve their performance is so much better than if I just, shovel it on them. And so, we talked about this, but just a quick review, with the emotional intelligence class, I teach when you deliver feedback, let's state the observable facts of the situation. And then let me understand Is that accurate? What is your perspective? What is your learning there? I want to have a conversation about this. I don't want to deliver, you were 5 minutes late. That puts your team in a bad spot and I expect you to correct that in the future. No. Hey, you were 5 minutes late. What's going on? Is everything okay? It's a conversation.
All right, brilliant, Brett. And we did cover that in great detail in the first episode that you're on. So people, if you want to talk about how to give good feedback and how to receive feedback too, we covered that in that episode. Please do go back and listen to that one. All right, Brett, that's probably enough. That's all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank you again and go into, I'm going to give you the chance to do our rapid round again. You did this last time and it'll be interesting to see if any of the answers change. So the first one, what's the one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20?
Well, I think I revel in my morning meditations and in my evening reflections and how rich they are. So just having mindfulness practices so that I'm not just reacting on emotion, but I'm considering. So for example, I had a little bit of anxiety coming back, Mick, and talking to you again. And I'm like, is that, the imposter syndrome? Is that the truth? No, it's not. My human mind tend to go to the negative side of things. Well, what's the balancing side of it? What things have I been able to achieve and what things do I know? Mindfulness helps you bring balance to your life. And I wish I had known that when I was 20.
Yeah, wonderful, Brett. Okay, what's your favorite book?
This hasn't changed, the 4 Agreements. It is 4 simple rules to live life by. I love the simplicity of it. I love how profound it is, and I would recommend it to anybody. And I think one of the things, too, Mick, that we didn't talk about is often leaders are very smart people, very accomplished people, and so you try and come up with solutions to things that cover 100% of the problem. And they can be very complex, and you've lost everyone else. Simplicity is such an important attribute, so that people can understand the concept when they're not around you. And that's what I love about the 4 Agreements.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, we often skip the importance of simplicity. Right, what's your favorite quote?
I'm not meaning to get religious here. This has changed because I have a lot of favorite quotes, but God is a comedian playing to an audience too afraid to laugh. I think that sometimes, and I think it was Voltaire that said that, I could be wrong, but I think a lot of times we get so wrapped up in the challenges of life. And you know what? We take ourselves too seriously, and it's okay. It'll be fine. We'll get through this. And just to realize that not to take ourselves and things too seriously.
All right, brilliant, Brett. I love that. And finally, how do people get hold of the book? So you got a book coming out, you've got Humessence as well. How do people get in contact with you, Brett, and get a copy of the book?
You get it through Amazon. It'll be available on February 11th. You can get an ebook or you can get a soft cover book, and you can get a hold of me at Humessence. So HUMESSENCE.com. That's my email. So yeah, I hope that you get a copy and that you use it, what's in the book, to create wonderful leaders at your organization and engaged workers that have fulfilling lives.
Wonderful, Brad. I'm going to say something on your behalf. As an author talking to an author, I also will say to the audience, please do get a copy and get a copy early, because the Amazon algorithm greatly appreciates those early sales in the first few weeks of the book's release. And then go ahead and leave an honest review on Amazon, because the algorithm also likes to see the engagement and the reviews coming in. So for one author trying to support another author, please people grab a copy of your book and leave Brett a honest review on Amazon.
Thank you so much, Mick. And I'm holding up a copy of the cover design, and I will ask you to think about who are the leaders in this picture.
Oh, that's a wonderful picture. Yeah, I absolutely love that. And yeah, to me, it's very clear it's those people that are holding that space for everyone else. Very good. All right. Thank you so much, Brett. Such a pleasure having you back on the show. You're a true gentleman, and I love everything that you've got to share in the world of leadership and on your vision to create a better world for people.
Thank you, Mick. And you do a fantastic job, and keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you for listening to The Leadership Project at mickspears.com. A huge call out to Faris Sadek for his video editing of all of our video content, and to all of the team at TLP. Joanne Goes On, Gerald Calabo, and my amazing wife, Say Spears. I could not do this show without you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel, where we bring you interesting videos each and every week. And you can follow us on social, particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, in the meantime, please do take care Look out for each other and join us on this journey as we learn together and lead together.